You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
(2022) for the 21.5 Show. I'm Max. This is Dylan.
Hello.
We're back. New year, new fresh content.
Excited to come at you. If you're new to the show, welcome. My name is Dylan. I am a pilot in business aviation, and I'm joined by my colleague, friend, and brother-in-law, Max.
Also a professional pilot in business aviation and an airline pilot also.
Why not do it all? Are you an aerobatic pilot too? How about a crop dusting pilot?
Former. But also a test pilot currently.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot of hats over at the 21.5 Show.
Right.
Well, we're glad you are joining us, folks. A lot to discuss today. Unfortunately, 2022 started off on a bad foot with a crash already. El Cajon, San Diego, LearJet. Did you hear this? Have you heard the audio of it?
I've heard the chilling audio.
Wind 190 at 5, runway 17, clear to land. Runway 17, clear to land. And 04 inside, we'd like to squawk VFR for 80 Zulu. LearJet 80 Zulu, roger, runway 17, clear to land. Now we'd like to take runway 27, 80 Zulu. LearJet 80 Zulu, understand you're canceling IFR? Yes, sir. LearJet 80 Zulu, IFR cancellation received. You can overfly the field, make left traffic runway 27 right, runway 27 right, clear to land. Change to runway 27 right, clear to land. Runway 27 right, clear to land, 80 Zulu. And can you turn off the lights for us a little bit more? They're at 100% now. Oh, shit! Oh, shit! Oh, shit!
Chilling end there.
And for anybody that flies airplanes, that sends a chill up your spine, I think.
Yeah. So a lot was talked about there right after the crash. Actually, I need to go back and correct myself. I think it was actually happened in 2021, not in 2022. It was very late December. But either way, though, of course, folks jumped online right away to start speculating about what happened. If you didn't see it, what we do know is that a LearJet was on a precision approach into Gillespie. And then they attempted to break off that approach and it looks like do a visual there, as you heard on the radio. And in that circling maneuver, they ended up crashing. So, folks have looked at the flight aware data and some of the altitude.
ADSB and all everything else. And they quarterback it and I think make a lot of aggressive assumptions based on limited data. But I think probably what we can agree on is that they lost control maneuvering at low altitude, right?
It sure, all signs seem to point to that. And I mean, especially when you listen to the pilot, I don't know. To me, when I hear that, that's like something's happening and I don't know why it's happening.
Yeah. Or something has happened and you realized too late and
there's nothing you can do.
There's not enough. You're out of altitude, airspeed, or ideas all at once.
So Dan Greider, he has a YouTube channel. He got on and made a video that night and he was calling out the pilots, he was calling out the training centers.
Let's be very clear. We're not endorsing this video, but we watched it. We were just together for something, right? And we watched that video, and I was like, but he did bring up a good point that I think spurred some discussion between you and I that we kind of wanted to bring to the show, and that was minimum maneuvering speeds. And a lot of times those are obviously based on flap setting, right? And we're not going to dig too deep into the weeds just now. We are going to get a subject matter expert and talk about this further, but it was interesting because in my job as an airline pilot, we fly everything by those minimum maneuver. You're not allowed to go below those minimum maneuvering speeds. And the 737 has a million different flap settings. Unfortunately, we're not required to memorize all of those because every minimum flap maneuvering speed is posted on the airspeed tape. So, and I remember too, way back in the day when we flew the Embraer at American Eagle, those speeds weren't bugged on the airspeed tape, but we certainly had to memorize all of those. Those were memory items, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you ask most business jet pilots, and for those of you that are listening, do you know the minimum maneuvering speeds for all of the different flap settings in your airplane? Probably not. And I can't say that I did on the XLS or the Gulfstream or any of those, really. It's if you look, it's buried somewhere, usually deeper on some airplanes or in weird places like yours, right?
Ours was just in a training supplement, and I think the OEM was kind of trying to steer away from publishing something. I'm not really sure, like in their official documents. It was in a published document from the training center, yeah, but that's minimum maneuvering speed with flaps, I think. I agree. If we can take nothing away from this crash, and who knows what actually happened, but here's something that we can all challenge ourselves, all professional pilots. Do we know what the minimum maneuvering speed in the different flap configurations for the airplane we're flying? And if we don't, or maybe we need a refresher, this is a good wake up call. Like, hey, let's pay attention. Let's look, and maybe it's not published on your airplane, and maybe you're going to have to do some math and figure it out. They've got this formula for the let me look it up here. The term is the defined minimum maneuvering speed, and there's an equation that's like 1.404 times the clean configuration, and then that's like a DMMS speed. And Dane Greider talked about that. I haven't done a ton of research on that, but it's a good starting point at least to get some awareness. And I mean, even if you have a conversation with your fellow crew members about like, hey, what's the minimum speed we should fly with full flaps not fly, but maneuver? I think anytime we can bring awareness to that right now, I think that should be the focus in the aftermath of this crash.
Well, it is as a pilot, period, professional or not, you should look at all these accidents and learn from them, right? And I think that's going to be one of the big takeaways, but it's just one of those things where right now, before we really know what happened, I think that is something that you can call awareness to. And I looked it up in the XLS, and sure enough, in the operating manual, there's a chart that says, and it's usually a ref number, so ref 30, ref 10, ref 20 for whatever each flap setting, but yeah, we fly. It's just crazy because in the airlines it seems like it's such a big emphasis on that. Those flap speeds are like everything. Like you have maximum speeds at all airplanes. It seems like we focus on the maximum speeds but never the minimum, right? And it's funny because the other thing too is really, extending the flaps right up against the maximum speed is not great practice. And, it's hard on the airplane. It's hard on the flaps. We're encouraged to extend the flaps as we approach their minimum speed, right? Because it's the least amount of wear and tear on the flaps. And it's just funny because it's just such a stark difference of the emphasis between in the airline world and in the business jet world. And we're all flying swept wing jets. I mean, it's not that big of a difference, whether that's in a Gulfstream or a Citation or whatever. I mean, we fly jets by the speeds. And so it's just look it up. And
yeah. For Bombardier, if you got it in a Bombardier airplane, we found it in the operations reference manual. So you may have to dig there. You said you did find it for Cessna?
Yeah, it was in the operating manual, is what they call it. And it's kind of, it has like all the profiles and stuff like that. It kind of looks like in other planes, you've seen like the flight safety kind of guide. But Cessna, they have it. It's part of the OEM deal. And it's called the operating manual. And sure enough, minimum maneuvering speeds. And there's a chart with clean and flaps.
And if there's nothing, I think maybe, and look, I'm not an expert on anyone else's airplane, but if you can't find anything like that, I would say maybe look at the circling approach profile, because usually that'll have like an additive on like ref plus, a certain speed. So another thing to look at.
At the end of the day, it's good to have some sort of framework in mind.
Exactly.
As you maneuver different configurations. So
even if it's just you and one other pilot, and that's the whole operation is just two of you. If you just agree, like, look, we're not going to maneuver below a certain speed with full flaps or at any flap setting, I think that's a good conversation to have to start 2022 off.
Yeah, let's start the conversation here, and we will finish it at a later show date with an expert that can really give a good grasp on it. So,
okay. Sounds good. Well, since we talked last, Max, you made it through your first end of the year Christmas holiday season at the airlines. How'd it go?
It's what you make of it, man. You make the best of it. It's all you can do.
Yep.
That's fine. But,
It's it's been, I mean, did you see the thing the other day? They're going to pay United, I think, three times regular pay.
Oh yeah, triple time on open time, and all the airlines are. Well, no, I shouldn't say all. A lot of the airlines have determined what it takes to motivate the workforce to not call in sick and to pick up extra shifts. That is to pay them an exponential amount. So
that's right. It's going to be, a lot of people are going to be. I was going to say a lot of people buying a new car maybe in 2022, but there's no cars to buy.
It's going to be brutal though. It was just the weather that we saw last week in the Midwest that moved to the East. That combined with these massive COVID like sick call rates. Yeah, it's just good stuff out there.
Oh boy.
I've just seen stuff go down and I'm just like, wow, this is just.
Well, you sent me that picture the other day in Baltimore where they ran out of de-ice fluid and like every flight was canceled. And it's just like,
it's like when you start a day that way, it's just the trickle down effect is so massive. And then it's just a massive, there's always at the airlines, the people that have been part of that schedule is what you realize is, they can cancel flights during the day and pull gaps and stuff. But at the end of the day, like no matter how bad the day, you have to get everything to reset the next day. All the airplanes and people have to be in position that night for them to start it all over again in the morning. And it's just like this desperate attempt to move metal and people, that late in the night sometimes to just get everything in position to start fresh the next day. Because if you don't, as we saw, like when Southwest stumbled a couple months ago, it takes days to recover all of that, to get it all. And so if you can you just watch the struggle of the operation to try and get everything in place, even though because the whole day's already been screwed up and just, it's hard to watch sometimes, honestly.
Well, it's crazy. I mean, so you work the PM shift and, for folks that haven't flown airlines before, there's usually, especially when you're doing like 3 or 4 day trips, like usually ends up you're either going to be flying the first flight out in the morning and then kind of they call it the AMs, or you're going to be doing the PMs where you're the last flight in of the night.
You start in the afternoon, you finish, last flight in the night, or you start early in the morning and you finish in the afternoon.
You're doing the kickoff flight in the morning. And it's funny because like both have their pros and cons. Like it's funny because you're an AM guy. I'm more of a PM fan, but the PM shift is brutal because you got to get that plane to the outstation. So your duty time, like usually duty time isn't a problem if you start at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, So
in the last 30 days, I can tell you multiple times, I've gone to bed at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Like by the time I get to the hotel,
right,
really late. And it's funny. I talk about this with people all the time, the AM PM riff. Mm-hmm. It's like my biggest problem, I've told you this a million times, is like I like a lot of things about the PMs, but my like kryptonite is that I cannot sleep in. And if you go to bed at 2 or 3 or whatever and you just can't sleep in, no matter how dark it is and the whole thing, it just kills you. Like after, but you run at a sleep deficit, and day one it's okay. The second day and I make it through and I'm okay, but it's just like by the last day you're just like, dude, I just got to get some like a full amount of sleep, and it's really hard for me. But what I've been forced to do it now for coming on like 2 months, and I am adapting to it. Like you can force yourself to adapt, and I am sleeping in now, and like I kind of got it under control. But the problem is, especially when things are like they are, and everything's still stressed, you start late, so everything's kind of running late, and you're just trying to catch up all day. And or at least in the morning, you usually are starting on time unless something's wrong, but for the most part at least you start off. And the other thing too is like in the summer especially, you start in the
thunderstorms
morning. There's no thunderstorms. PM you start in the afternoon, you just battle that stuff all day long.
I remember the best thing ever was like if you're doing the mornings and you flew with a captain and you'd get a text like the night before and be like, hey, the flight into the outstation didn't make it in last night, so you can sleep in tomorrow because we're not. Did you ever get that?
Yeah.
You guys probably. Yeah.
No, not very much.
It was like the gift that keeps on giving. It's like the next flight out isn't until like 11 a.m. And you're just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is when you wake up at 4 a.m, East Coast time, shower, get your uniform on, get everything ready, and then you like get to the airport and like, oh yeah, we didn't tell you the plane didn't make it in last night. And you're just like, oh my god.
I remember when I left, and a lot of like people like you that are a little bit younger than me and stuff were still in Prescott, like in college, and out partying and stuff. And I remember I would get up East Coast to go to work in the morning when I was at the regionals, and I'd talk to people, and everybody's getting home from the bars, and I'm getting up to go to work, and I was like, dude, what?
It's passing off the baton from the beer to the coffee.
Yeah, it was like, I was like, wow. Oh. And then I remember I'd come home, and I had one of those really early mornings, and I'd get home, and then I'd commute back to Chicago, get there, and then I'd be like ready to go out, and we'd go out and stuff, and I'd look at my watch and be like, dude, I've been up for like 26 hours now.
It's so hard. It's a young man's game.
The mid-20s game.
Yeah, it's a young man's game. Well, enough about us. On to the rest of the show. No reviews to read this week, Max, but did you know we're launching our new artwork for this episode, our new album artwork?
Thrilled.
So I'm excited to hear what people think. It's a little, I remember the first time you and I saw it, we're like, whoa, kind of a little different, but it grows on you a little bit. So curious to hear what our listeners think. We hired a pro to do it.
Yeah.
Which I think was good. But yeah, so we're happy with it, and we'd love to hear what you think about it. And we'll be rebranding our website a little bit and updating merch and all that kind of stuff with the new logo and color scheme. So thanks to Zach for doing all that design for us. What's coming up in the mail?
Well, as you know, the mailbag has been recently sponsored by our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy. And I was looking through their newsletter, and a couple of things that are new. One, super exciting, breaking news. The U.S. Department of Transportation's Chart 17 Hazardous Materials Marking, Labeling, and Placarding Guide has been updated. Everybody rolls their eyes and says, what does that mean to me? A couple things. One, usually, especially if you're an air carrier, that chart is found in your operations manual under hazmat, so that has to be updated. But what's interesting that I learned is I would say most people that operate under Part 91 don't think they really have to worry about this. But remember, each government agency has its own definition of applicability. And as far as these hazmat regulations apply to aircraft operating in commerce. And that's not the same as the FAA definition of air carrier. So I would encourage you to read this. And I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm going to make you go and get the Q4 newsletter from the Advanced Aircrew Academy. Find out for yourself. But let me just tell you, it's very applicable to everybody that flies airplanes and wants to get paid, like as a pilot. So,
okay.
Other thing that was interesting that continues to be a problem is runway excursion trends. And you would think we would be getting better, but it turns out there's been a 35% increase in 2021 over 2020.
Jeez. So, and we started the year off with talking about runway excursions.
But if that's not enough, light jets, so less than 21,000 pounds, continue to have the majority of excursions, followed by turboprops.
Wow.
How do you figure that?
Blows my, yeah, that's crazy.
20% had a mechanical issue, and 15% were on a short flight of less than 200 miles. But
okay, I have a couple theories.
Go ahead.
A turboprop airplane, well, they kind of allude to this, shorter flight and potentially more landings, right? So you'd say the smaller the airplane, the more landings it's going to be making? Are you following me on that logic?
Look around, dude. What kind of airplanes do you see more of? How many turboprops do you see nowadays? Like, think about that. Like, if you're talking about the total fleet of airplanes in this country, how many of those could be turboprops? I mean, percentage-wise, I don't know what it is, but just, I mean, look around. It's just not that. And how is that the second highest group? Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I would think that would be
crazy.
The last. Like, if I just asked you, I'm sure you would have said that's the last group, right? Between
I would have
light
jets,
thought, mid-sized jets, large jets, and what, it's crazy. So here's the thing. And what we've done at my airline job, and I won't go into the whole policy because it's specific to how we do things, but the gist of it is this. You pick a point, like a touchdown point, that if you are going to touch down beyond that, you go around, period. And whether that's the first third of the runway, or it depends on your landing distance and your planning, or what, we utilize several factors that have to do with performance, the length of the runway, yada, yada, yada. But just having that where you brief it on the approach to say, listen, we're going to touch down no later than 2,000 feet. This is a precision runway, so it has markings. So the 2,000 foot mark is going to be evidenced by the runway markings, or you can go as far as like using Jet chart to measure 2,000 feet down the runway and say, okay, 2,000 feet is right before the intersection of the runway and taxiway figure. And so if I'm going to land, my point of land touchdown is going to be past that, you call the go around, like to the non-flying pilot, and we'll go try it again. And I think that's a really good thing too, because a lot of these runway excursions are from people that are high and fast, or, and they float way down the runway, and everybody knows, but they don't have that mindset of going around, especially like in the flare.
Yeah.
And you got to look too in the book and say, look, go around is an option all the way. For us, it's tell you deploy the thrust reversers. So it doesn't, just because you're on the ground doesn't mean you can't go around. So it's one of those things. I think that, again, it would be good to talk to a subject matter expert on this, but I think we
already did. We talked to Dan last year about this. I want to remind everybody to go check out episode 49, and where we discuss this in depth. But remember, they had that entire checklist that they went through.
Right.
And you can get, it's the global action plan for the prevention of runway excursions, GAPRI. Advanced Aircrew Academy has created an entire course on this. Highly recommend folks check that out. I'll have a link to it in the show notes. They talk about the GAPRI checklist and a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, Max, in setting these minimums. And I think in some point it's just a failure of communication, right?
Yeah.
I love that idea of verbalizing that, like, hey, we're touching down by here, or you tell me to go. And that puts some pressure on the other, or not pressure, but I think it tells the other pilot, hey, it's okay for you to say, like, we need to go around, and you're not going to hurt my feelings. Like, I told you to do this.
Right. We talk. Yeah. And that way you've talked about it, and there's no hesitation. We say, look, it's no big deal. Let's just go around and we'll just do it again. Do it right. But yeah, I think if you don't look at accidents or these alarming trends and try and be proactive and do something in your operation to mitigate the risk here, you're not doing your job. So check out Advanced Aircrew Academy's course and their materials there to help you reduce your risk.
At aircrewacademy.com. We'll have links in the show notes. All right. On to the mailbag. First one says, thank you guys for an awesome podcast. As an Army aviator transitioning into this industry, the vicarious learning has been awesome. Also, the A-10 is my favorite airplane, but I hated hearing them check on the net. They always hogged all of the work. And that's from Zach. I don't know what that means. You'll have to, do you know what the net is? And
well, I
get the hog joke, but I don't know what the net is. That's what I
was laughing about. No, I don't know what that means. I would have to make the assumption that that's where all the other aviators, like the Army helicopters and stuff, are talking with it, forward air controller or something.
It's not the RimNet that we're on the CB radio. The ham radio. That's a story for another day. Max's ham radio license. All right. Next one says, can you do a podcast on contract flying? I took early COVID retirement as an airline captain, and I really miss flying. I am paying for my own training so that I can do contract flying again. I did this for 10 years before becoming an airline pilot. However, after researching contract flying, a lot has changed since I did contract flying in the 90s. I am particularly interested in keeping myself safe and within the letter of the law. Love your podcast. Listen while I'm walking my chocolate lab. Okay, no name attached with that.
Yeah, the world of contract flying can be a very treacherous place, especially if you've been used to the very controlled world of 121 flying. So I think it's good that he's reaching out to try and educate, but I think we've covered a lot in our previous shows, right?
Episode 3 and episode 56, I'd refer to, this is all we're doing is just telling people to listen to old shows. But episode 56, we talked to a full-time contract pilot. He broke down what it was like. But episode 3, and maybe some newer listeners haven't even listened to that one, we talked to a retired airline pilot who had successfully transitioned to business aviation. And the entire topic of the conversation was attitude, because that really is the key to this whole making the transition from airlines back to business aviation, because the attitude is basically going to make or break your career after airline retirement.
What about also when we talked to John Clark at Jet RVSM?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
what episode
that'd be
was
another
that?
good one.
Not to put you on the spot, but to put me on the spot.
Put me on the spot. Episode 45.
Boom.
So there you go. You got a lot of catching up to do. Best of luck. Do it the right way. Listen to all those podcasts about attitude and get online too. Check out propilotworld.com, the Facebook groups. Read, do not post right away, and learn from other retired airline pilots who have made similar posts and stuck their foot in their mouth. That's my advice to you. Okay, you want to read the next one?
Good evening, gents. Over the last couple of weeks, I've managed to ask a ton of questions and reached out to everyone I knew, from current 91 drivers to airport managers and former flight safety directors and everyone in between. Through it all, and a ton of background research, I found it to be a scam. I learned a big lesson.
I should have set this one up. Here, okay, let me set this up and then you read it. Okay, Max, we got an email from the Cessna to Rocket guy, a follow-up email. We keep asking for follow-ups, and we finally got one. So you want to read this one?
Good evening, gents. Over the last couple of weeks, I managed to ask a ton of questions and reached out to everyone I knew, from current 91 drivers to airport managers, former flight safety directors, and everyone in between. Through all that, and a ton of background research, I found it to be a scam. I learned a big lesson today that not everyone I come across in this industry is who they say they are. I myself thought it was odd to try for a PIC type, a 500-hour guy in a rocket of a jet. It was of no loss to me, however, as I am slated to go to an FO class with regional this coming August. That's a long time out, isn't it? Thanks again for all the mentorship and all that y'all do. Blue skies, Mark. Yeah.
So this was the guy, Mark, who wrote in last episode and said, hey, I've got 500 hours and I want a PIC type me in a Lear 60.
Yeah, we were like,
no.
I don't think that's so good. Well, he was smart.
Yeah, good.
Ask questions.
Way to ask
Be
questions.
Skeptical. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
It probably is. That's right. All right. Read this last one. This is a good one.
Happy New Year, gentlemen. I just finished listening to your year-end podcast with Dan and realized you two are really young. You said 9/11 was the only time the air traffic system shut down, and that is not correct. The ATC strike in 1981 also saw the system come to a screeching halt. I was flying cargo then, and everyone was grounded for a couple of days until President Reagan fired them and manned the facilities with management and scabs. We had to get a reservation in order to fly for quite a while. I was also airborne when the planes hit the buildings in New York on 9/11. My mechanic called our flight phone to tell us that the plane ran into the World Trade Center, and I couldn't figure out how a small plane could do that. Fortunately, we were headed to PDK when ATC started diverting planes, and we were able to land at our desired destination. I immediately walked up to the FBO counter and rented 2 cars, one for our passengers and one for us, and booked hotel rooms. We were stuck there for 3 days and eventually ended doing a relief flight with doctors and nurses to HPN in order to actually go home. By the way, the L-1011 did have elevators because the galley was downstairs. Have me tell you the story of the Eastern flight attendant crew that operated a brothel in the galley on the transcontinental flights back in the day. The L-1011 was also set up where on approach you maintained a given pitch angle and increased or decreased descent rate using spoilers. It was a great plane to fly, and it did cruise with a nose-up attitude, so the FAA's got to work out pushing the carts up the aisle. Hope you guys had a wonderful New Year celebration and look forward to what 22 has in store. It's from our boy Dave Keys. That's it. We got to get him on. I got to hear about this brothel story.
I was trying to hint at that, but I'd heard some stories from some other T-Way flight attendants that I'd flown with.
What? I mean, is that? Did you? I got to
unbelievable.
Google that, at least.
Yeah, unbelievable. So, great email, Dave. Thank you very much.
We got to call him for this, though, right?
I need to say a belated congratulations to Dave. He is now the Domestic Operations Committee Vice Chair for MBAA, too. So, doing a lot of awesome stuff for the industry. So, thanks for all your hard work, Dave. Yeah. All right. We're going to try something new, Max. Are you ready?
Go ahead.
Diamond Dogs Assemble. It's time for the Harvey Watt Diamond Dogs.
If you don't know what that comes from, you got to see Ted Lasso. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, man. Yeah, 20% of the people know, probably. All right, Flight Advice. It's our regular segment where folks write in asking us for advice. We do our best to source information from experts, and then also usually offer our half-baked opinions as well. It's brought to you by our friends at Harvey Watt Insurance. Of course, you know Harvey Watt. They are the largest provider of loss of medical insurance to professional pilots throughout the globe. Over 70,000 pilots have covered through Harvey Watt. It doesn't matter if you're an airline pilot, business aviation pilot, cargo, anywhere in between. They have a plan to cover you. And as you'll hear in this story, I think this emailer wishes he would have had it. So let's jump right in. It says, "Hey guys, long-time caller, first-time listener here. First off, just want to say thanks for all the info you share. I've gone back and listened to most of your podcasts, and they've all been really helpful. But I guess not helpful enough because now I need some advice. A little backstory on me. Graduated college in St. Louis back in 2018. Was racking up the hours instructing and headed to Air Wisconsin. Around about the 500 to 600 hour mark, I had a spontaneous pneumothorax, stupid lung collapse, and ended up losing his medical. I called AOPA for medical advice, and they and myself didn't really understand the gravity of his situation. Submitted not nearly enough info to the FAA, and I was promptly told that I was not fit to hold any class medical. So I was left instructing Part 61 with no medical. I could not act as PIC, so this meant no private pilot or instrument students. There were little to no commercial students, so I ended up going back to college to teach. It took 3.5 years, but I finally got my medical back last month. Special issuance, second class privileges. In the meantime, I'm at 1,200-ish hours and just completed a master's in aviation this past December. So what do I do now? I bought a house in St. Louis back in May. I'm going to complete my MEI within a month since I'm now able to take check rides again. Since I have a second-class medical, should I pursue corporate aviation or the airlines? I've always wanted to be an airline pilot, but I'm conflicted. Am I even hireable with just SIC privileges? I haven't talked to recruiters yet since I still intend on getting my MEI and building more multi-time. I have a few leads on corporate stuff, and I'm thinking my earning potential might be higher in the business world since I could theoretically be PIC. Am I insurable? Can Harvey Watt use me as a sponsor for loss of medical insurance? Because holy cow, that sucked. Please, 121.5, you're my only hope. Diamond dogs assemble, woof, woof, woof. And that's from John. Well, great email, John, on an unfortunate situation. Sorry to hear you've gone through so many challenges. Where to begin here? So we ended up forwarding this on to Harvey Watt to see if we could get any thoughts from them. And here's what's so awesome about Harvey Watt. We got information from the former federal air surgeon within 24 hours of sending this in. So that's the kind of access that you get as a customer of Harvey Watt. I want to highlight one thing in here, and that's that he lost his medical and used AOPA for medical advice, and they ended up not sending in the right paperwork. And that held things up. And I think that really highlights the fact that, like, when it comes to your medical and the paperwork stuff, you need to have somebody that knows exactly what's going on, and you cannot fool around. Expert advice, I think, is invaluable in that situation because, as you can hear, I mean, he couldn't fly.
It's so
and he was
complicated.
Screwed.
And time consuming. You want to get it right on the first try because it takes forever.
Absolutely. And so we sent it into Harvey Watt, and they had some opinions. Now, I mean, it's hard in this segment because we don't know all of his medical history, and quite frankly, we don't want to get into that. So I don't know whether or not he if he would have used somebody else, he could have gotten a first class or not. That's neither here nor there, I think. And I think the question we want to pose today is, if it is in fact true that he could never get a first class medical again, what should he do? And that's, I think, the question that, you and I can maybe give some advice on.
I think what we kind of figured out is what most airlines, while you may not need a first class medical all the time, like to act as a first officer, a requirement of employment is the ability to hold a first class, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Because I think you were saying even at Southwest, right? Like you only have to hold a second once you're
as
there.
a first officer, right? But to be a captain, you have to maintain a first class, and I think to get hired, you have to be able to hold a first class. So,
yep. And then I just looked at most of the regional airlines hiring websites today, and all of them listed a first class medical as a requirement.
We know for a fact. A lot of times in business aviation, there's no need for a first class medical, and you could have a pretty successful career. So
Yep.
I think that's probably the path, right? What about did you look up for 91K like NetJets and FlexJet and everybody?
Yeah, it said same thing. First class medical required. Yeah. This is from my internet Googling again. I'm like saying that doesn't replace you actually having a conversation with a recruiter, maybe talking about it. They may just post one thing on the internet, but there may be some differences. But
you will not have more leverage than you do right now. So now would be the time to ask.
Now would be the time to ask those questions.
Maybe the middle of next year you might have some more leverage if things hold together.
I agree with what he said. Business aviation is probably his best avenue. You may be able to get hired at a 135 operator as an SIC. And honestly, like in very general terms, I think your best bet is to go to, if you can convince a 135 to hire you, go there and prove yourself. You may have to fly SIC for 3 or 4 years and prove to them, hey, I'm keeping my medical. I'm not a high risk individual. I'm somebody that's trustworthy. I'm a great employee and that kind of stuff. And I think it's through building a relationship and showing that that you are worth an investment, that somebody's going to take a chance on you and probably put you up to captain.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's my thought.
But I think the encouraging thing is that there is a will, or there is a way to be a professional pilot, and I think you could have a pretty darn good career. So if you have the will, there is a way. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's James Onieal.
So the way I understand the situation is second class medical, we're making the assumption that can never go past second class medical, right?
Right.
Okay. So like 2 weeks ago, you had to have a college degree to get hired by Delta. and I think that's been a requirement since Orville Wilbur, did their first flight. So the reason why I bring that up is, if you ask somebody, we won't go a year ago because that was in the coronavirus, but maybe the year before coronavirus when everything was, still hopping like crazy. And they said, hey, do you ever think Delta will drop the college degree requirement? I mean, people would look at you like you're insane. Like there's no way they'll ever drop that. Now it's gone, right? Poop. It's like it never existed. Okay. So the reason why I bring that up is because when pilots tend to think about qualifications, they think about them in terms of they're these like hard, like written in stone. When the reality is you've got to go to the regs and find out what the minimum standard is, because that's what we're going to right now. So the reality of the situation is there are a number of jobs where you can legally operate an aircraft on a second class medical certificate, right? I know I'm supposed to be an expert on regulations, but I'm not, right? So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but certainly Part 91, you can operate left seat captain, a jet with a second class medical, correct?
Yep.
Okay. I should admit this on public radio on how rusty I am on my regulations, but I think you can do that on 135 as well. Am I correct on that?
I think so.
I think it's 121 where the limitation comes in, where to sit in the left seat, you have to have a first class medical. So the first thing is we go to the regs and we find out what's the legal minimum, right? And if the legal minimum says, hey, look, you can fly with a second class medical, then I think the opportunity is on the table. Now, what we got to look at from there is how do you increase the probability that's actually a legitimate shot? And to be honest, that is trust and rapport building. That's kind of some of the networking stuff we've talked about before. So we'll use the easiest example out there, right? But if you're a rock star flight safety instructor and every week these clients are coming through and you're like the best instructor they've ever had, and they can legally put you in the left or right seat of the jet, well, what's going to stop them from doing it? It's their insurance provider. That's it, right? As long as their insurance provider will allow it and the regs will allow it, they're going to be open to it. And so would I give up? No, I wouldn't. But I would set my mind around, okay, what am I going to do to make myself more competitive, more desirable, more valuable? Which means I'm going to start thinking about how do I take my flying skills and pair that with something else the flight department needs that they don't have, and start hitting that really, really hard, because I do believe that the opportunities are out there. I'm not saying it's going to be easy to get them, but I don't think it's impossible. I just think it's going to take some creativity, some hard work, and some different approaches to do it.
Well, absolutely. And I think, in the email, he mentioned he just got his master's. He's in St. Louis, master's in aviation. There's a flight safety in St. Louis there. That might be a good place to start. And maybe there's other courses you can take at that university that you have a relationship with, like safety.
So that brings up an interesting point, right? What percentage of clients that go through the St. Louis Training Center are airline versus corporate, right? If you have a disproportionately high amount of airline clients coming through your training facility, right? Or let's take the flight safety in Columbus, where a disproportionately high amount of the people going through are NetJets pilots. That may not be the center you want to work in, because the people that are coming through, it doesn't matter how much they like you, right? They can't do anything about it. But you go out to a training center that's taken a lot of Part 91 clients, right? A lot of 135 clients. That's where you're going to get your value add. So it's not just about going to a sim center. It's about picking the right sim center. It's about picking one where legitimately, as you come in contact with these people, you do have an opportunity to potentially become a peer.
Makes sense. I mean, I guess also, he mentioned working for the airlines. Maybe you can't be an airline pilot, but there's other jobs you can do for an airline that you can kind of still use your pilot credentials too, right? Obviously, sim instructor comes to mind.
Once again, that's where you got to go into regs and union contracts to find out, does it require an FO to have a second class medical, or does it require an FO to have a first class medical? So the three areas that you have to look at, number one is the regulation, because nobody can drop below the regulation. The second from there is if you're in a corporate setting, it is the insurance broker that you have to go to. If you're in an airline setting, it's a union contract. And as long as it doesn't say you can't do it, you can.
So you're saying there's a chance.
The reality is, don't limit yourself to what to the way things have been done in the past, and don't limit yourself to kind of your peer group saying, well, hey, you can't do that, because they've been like me. They didn't do the research. They didn't actually sit down and read the regs. Go into the reg, go talk to the insurance broker, go read the union contract. If when you go to those three locations, if it doesn't say you cannot do it, you definitely can do it. Now, will the recruiter entertain it? Will a principal entertain it? That becomes a different story. My personal opinion, I think on the corporate side, they tend to adapt and change a little bit more quickly than the airlines do. I'm not saying that it is this massively quick change, but when you have a department that has 3 to 5 people in it, they can be a little bit more nimble than a department that has 12,000 people in it, right? And so you really want to start pushing those networking avenues and finding out what they'd be open to it.
Well, I think the other thing that he has going for him is that, as we know, probably the most important aspect in any aviation career is timing. And his timing of getting his medical back and getting ready to hit it hard and scare something up is pretty good right now. So
yeah, you could have picked a better time.
You don't want to. Basically, the point is though, but in this big game of musical chairs, which we call aviation, the music always comes to a stop at some point, and everyone scrambles to find a chair. So it behooves you. Right now, I think that the deal is like, yeah, it's probably possible. It's possible. It certainly is within the realm of possibility, and so get on it and make something happen while the getting is good, because at some point it's not going to be as good. I think we all know that.
Right.
No, Max, it's never going to reverse course. Come on, man. The stock market always goes up.
Listen, James, you ever heard of this book called Hard Landings? I don't know if you've read it before, but
I don't even know what a hard landing looks like. So,
he's always prepared.
Yeah. I'm always prepared to hit the ground.
Another fun job. Two thoughts. Ones you had mentioned before we started recording, James. Airline recruiter could still be interesting as a job.
There is a huge shortfall of recruiters right now. So there are lots of opportunities in that. Sim instructor, right? You can take a look at 121 sim instructors we were talking about. JetBlue, we're talking about Southwest. United has, they're pretty much every one of the training centers right now is short staffed.
What about working for the FAA?
I wouldn't know.
Required?
So that brings up a really interesting question. The traditional job that folks think of when they think of the FAA is an aviation safety inspector. And there's two different types of positions that you can take for that. You have what's called general aviation, which is your 91, 135 stuff. And then you have what's called air carrier, which is your 120. If I remember correctly, and they may have changed, you have to go to USA Jobs to check it out. But they do require that you have a medical. I just can't remember if it was a second or a first, but you do have to have a medical. And then the interesting thing is if you want to be a GA inspector, at least at the time, 10 years ago, you had to have your instructor ratings. So if you don't have a medical though, and you're looking at jobs within the FAA, there's a whole boatload of jobs that are non-regulatory, that are not aviation safety inspector, that are worth looking at.
I mean, the Border Patrol, there's a million different things, I think, that with a second class medical, which is intended for a professional pilot, that there's certainly opportunity. You may have to look a little bit harder.
If you go to USA Jobs and under keywords you type in 2181, it will pop up all the different flying jobs across all the different government agencies.
Ooh.
So yeah, and then 1825 is going to be aviation safety inspectors.
We usually save that for our Patreon listeners. So
oh man, there you go.
There you go.
Sorry, I provided something of value for free.
Yeah,
we do that a lot over here. That's just to make up for the reg thing earlier. So, yeah, 2181. If you go to USA Jobs, that'll pop up, and it's across all government agencies. You'll see like Air Force stuff in there, Army stuff in there, FAA stuff will be in there, and NOAA will be in there. Yeah, Forest Service. So 2181 will be all the flying jobs, and then 1825 will be aviation safety.
Okay, last thing, Max. One other idea I would throw out. You and I both know a lot of aircraft sales guys and gals. They have a lot of fun. That might be another avenue. So those are, if you're a salesperson.
Yeah, so those are what are called intersections. There's actually a lot of jobs for pilots where like the pilot knowledge is a good one. The one that everyone always makes fun of is broker. But you got broker, you got sales, you have insurance, you've got recruiting, you've got a lot of companies that do aviation manuals, safety systems, sim training. There's actually a lot of jobs for pilots that are not flying that you can take. If you wanted to go get a different certificate, you become an aircraft dispatcher. There's a lot of different roles in there that you can take, including running some of the larger flight schools. Because if you're not out there teaching, you can do certain types of teaching without a medical as well. But just to keep it simple.
Yeah,
right?
That's what he was doing while he didn't have medical. Was doing commercial students.
There's a lot of things that you can do as a pilot that don't require a medical. But, from the context of just a pure flying position, yeah, I would take a look at some government positions. I would take a look at corporate positions first because I think it's the path of least resistance. But then outside of that, like I said, recruiting, sim instructing, ground instructing, sales, insurance, there's a lot of stuff out there.
I have another question for you that is pretty unrelated, but have you seen the show Ted Lasso by chance?
I have not.
All right, never mind then. We were going to induct you into the Diamond Dogs, but if you haven't seen the show.
All right, James. Well, I think that's good advice for our listener. It kind of sounds like the world still is oyster. Maybe just a little bit different.
You just got to be creative, which is, hard for a lot of guys that are just used to thinking about that. What is the one path that everybody walks down? And so you just start to think that, hey, because that path is concrete and the one most traveled, that's the only way. When you're like, dude, there's a whole bunch of dirt paths left and right. You're good. It's okay. So
I think that's the lesson for our listeners there. If you maybe aren't taking the freeway and you got to take one of these dirt paths, consult a professional. They can. They've kind of seen
I know
it all
every county road.
He's been down most, so
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
All
right. Well,
look, man, having somebody that's in their 20s, this loss of medical insurance is not just for, people in their late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, for sure.
It's something everyone needs to keep on their radar. So, John, good luck to you. If you want flight advice, you can hit us up info@215podcast.com, or if you want to keep it anonymous, we have the anonymous flight advice form on the website. You can just click that and send in your trouble.
Always happy to assemble the Diamond Dogs. Currently just Dylan and I, but we reserve the right to add additional dogs based on expertise.
As necessary. That's right. Well, coming up, Max, another conversation with our buddy Derek Vento.
Yeah. Derek Vento, he's just kind of the guy you talk to and just puts you in a good mood.
Exactly. He gets you fired up. Remember we had the review? Someone said that like, oh, dude, don't listen to that air traffic controller on 2x speed. It's super intense.
I forgot about that.
I'm going to warn you right now. Yeah. We're going to talk to him again. So if you listen to this fast, like slow it down. Just go regular speed for this one because we got Derek. He was on an off day and he was ready to fire. So I think you'll really enjoy our discussion. He gave a little advice to all the pilots who've been saying happy holidays and happy New Year and happy Thanksgiving over the radio. We asked him if controllers like that or not.
Well, we got an email from somebody that asked about that. So
that's a little teaser. Just have to find out.
Yeah.
All right.
I think Derek's part of the Diamond Dogs now. I mean, we directed a
Diamond Dog right to him.
There you go. An honorary member.
The Harvey Watt Diamond Dogs.
I hope Rob watches Ted Lasso. He's going to be like, these idiots. What have they done with our sponsorship?
Drag us through the mud.
The dog. What's a diamond dog? A dog and it's a diamond? What does that even mean? Here we go. Joining me is my new co-host, Derek Vento, while Max is off searching for paperwork.
On today's episode, joining us all the way from Arizona, Dylan, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Derek. See, you've been missing saying that, right? Because you haven't published a podcast in a while.
Yeah, it's been over a year, actually. Yeah, it's been a while.
Turns out this podcasting stuff is hard.
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort.
Not actually recording the podcast. It's all the stuff that happens after it. Dylan tells me is the hard part. I really wouldn't know, to be honest with you. But I'm just the talent.
I was going to say, hope you guys didn't go 50-50 on this, did you?
No. That's when it will cease production.
Oh, well, joining us is our friend Derek Vento, air traffic controller, former podcaster, professional photographer also, I think, and maybe many other things.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Derek.
Amateur freestyle rapper. Don't forget that.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Check 1, 2. Hi, is this thing on?
Derek, what's new? What's happening, dude?
Everything's good. Wow, a lot has actually happened. So let me just give you the quick rundown. I promise I won't rant, but that's not possible. So here we go. Left Atlanta in July of 2020. And I had put my paperwork in to come to New York TradeCon about December of 2019. And, I tried getting up to this facility several years prior, but they wouldn't allow me to get to New York without a certain amount of experience. And I get it, like, it's the big leagues, but in my mind, I guess Atlanta's the big leagues too.
Yeah, that's the big... Isn't Atlanta like the busiest airport in the...
Right. So, us in that Chicago debate, right? So I was like, okay, cool. Well, they said they wouldn't take me because I wasn't from a facility of a level 8 or higher. So essentially, as you guys know in air traffic, the level of facility 4 through 12, it's based off complexity and volume. So like Casper, Wyoming's a 4 because, well, hate to say, but if anyone from Casper, Wyoming is listening, it's not too hard. It's 1 or 2 airplanes a day, probably like no commercial operations, 2 taxiways, taxi to runway 29 via Alpha 1, right? So just being honest. So they said you need to go get more experience. But like any job, even in the corporate world, they're like, hey, you just graduated college, you need 5 years of experience. And you're like, well, how do I go get that?
Right.
So I looked at my boss and he's like, maybe Charleston. And I'm like, okay. Well, I wanted to get to Charleston and I just didn't work out. And another selection process went by and he goes, bro, you need to go to Atlanta. And I'm like, great, I'll move further south. By the way, this is for all the single guys out there. If you're single as a man, oh my God, Atlanta, it's amazing. You need to get down there, okay?
It's where the players play. Everybody knows that.
I think the ratio is like 7-1. So endless. So anyway, that's the young guy in me talking. Feel free to edit that out, by the way. So,
are you kidding me?
But no, seriously, I went to Atlanta and I spent the 3 years there. And this was December of 2019, and I decided to put my paperwork in. Now, I remember we had this guy come to work. It was kind of like funny, and I won't mention his name, but he looked like sick as a dog. Like, he looked awful. Now, naturally, in the winter months, you're thinking common cold, right? Maybe the flu. And then we had people, like, just becoming sick. And it was like, what's happening? And then, like, March came around, and they were like, hey, your transfer got approved. You're going to New York. I'm like, whoop-de-doo, this is awesome. And then this thing called COVID happened. And we were like, what is that? And they told me, they were like, hey, you're leaving in 90 days. And I'm like, well, let's see. So the worst place for the pandemic right now is like New York City. I guess I'll go. So they give me this report date and I move. And, it was the weirdest thing trying to transition during this time period because training throughout the national airspace system just wasn't going on at the time because we didn't want people like in close contact. And, I waited for quite a bit before I could like get my number called up. and I finally went to work and got everything knocked out. And
wait, so what did you do? Were you just waiting at home to be called for training?
He became a professional photographer.
well, yeah, exactly. So I really occupied my time with a lot of hobbies and stuff, but I stay up to date with like a lot of the training material. I just wasn't sure like what area I was going to be assigned. So as you guys know, in New York TradeCon, there's a couple areas: Islip area, JFK area, LaGuardia, Newark. In this area, it's almost like a little mini center. It's called Liberty. So essentially, all those airports share some of the same fixes for departure. So their job is to take all the airplanes and like sequence them in a line. Well, I get there and they're like, hey, you're going to go to Liberty. And like between you and I and everyone else listening, I was like, I'm just going to be working departures all day. I'm like, damn, like those guys work their ass off. Mind you, they do work their ass off because the center puts like a lot of entrails in place. So like you got to have 15 over Biggie, you got to have 25 over Zims. Well, the airspace is only like 50 miles wide. So it's like when one airplane is at Zims, the next airplane's like got to take off essentially, you know? But then like 10 airplanes get in the air and they're all going to Zims and you're like, well, how's this going to work, you know? So my boss notified me. They were like, hey, we're actually going to switch you up based on your experience. We're going to put you in the Newark area. Ooh. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. And I'll be honest, the complexity is like nothing I've ever experienced so far. Like I just finished the labs. So I did my satellite departure scenario. I did my feeder final scenario. And they make sure that you go through this like training in the labs before you go work live traffic. You know, it's like, yeah, sure. Like we could probably put you in a 737 to start off with, but like you probably should go to the labs and go to this simulator for a little bit before we put you in this plane. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm happy to be here and I don't see myself leaving anytime soon.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so is this like the final destination as an air traffic controller?
Well, it's tough because I don't think there's any secret to this, but New York TradeCon, you know, our staffing isn't great. But that's also a thing throughout the country, right? And even as a pilot, right? Staffing isn't great, right? I mean, that's no shocker, right? So it was cool. I got to fly a couple weeks ago and I got to talk to the flight attendants. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't know if you guys think it's weird. Maybe you guys can tell me, but at least, you know, from the commercial aviation side of things, I'm a passenger. I like talking with you guys. I'm not one of those get on the plane and just sit down. Like, I want to talk with you guys, whether it's the flight attendant or like I say hello to the pilots as I'm getting on or getting off, or, you know, I want that selfie in the max cockpit. Like, I'm not ashamed. You know, people think I'm crazy. Like, who's this guy? You know what I mean? Like, who's this guy? And I get it. It almost looks like I'm like some sort of like security threat. Like, whoa, no, don't approach the cockpit.
You're a little too old to be asking for wings, okay?
Yeah. I mean, seriously,
you're
you know?
welcome to take a picture, but there's a line here.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, dude.
Can't sit on my lap, no wings, okay?
Dude, some of the not the peanuts. What's that candy mix you guys, or that's like some
I don't
mix?
Even know what it's called.
Dude, it's like that mix you guys have. It's amazing. So,
oh, you like that? My kids love that. They want me to bring a whole bag home and put it in their lunches for school. It's so weird. It's better
than Chex Mix. It's so good. I mean, it's like salty. It's just really damn good.
They're really stingy on the generic Cheez-Its, though. That pisses me off. You're like, yeah, if you get one Cheez-It in a bag.
Yeah. And the pretzel thing, too. I noticed that they give you like four big pretzels.
Yeah,
and
I'm
like thinking,
pretzels.
Yeah, I don't know. And it's weird. If you're like a diabetic, you know, that's like, this is supposed to last me 4 hours. We're going from LaGuardia to Denver. How are we going to get there?
Hey, yeah, but on the long flights, we have the brownie brittle. Now
I love that. Yeah.
With
dangerous.
Coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
listen, if you guys can upgrade to the Biscoff bar like Delta, that would be great.
I wouldn't hold your breath.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the intro, right? Is that the intro? Are we good?
You know, Max and I were both flying back when, I don't know, it felt like about 10 months ago, and you'd have the towers go to ATC 0. They'd have to evacuate and close down. It seems like things are getting a little bit better.
Dude,
but
I landed.
It's definitely still out
Vegas,
there, right?
Like Reed Airport, uncontrolled in the middle of the day. It was uncontrolled airport, and airline pilots aren't the greatest with dealing with uncontrolled airspace. It was hilarious. It was crazy.
Derek, do they have the technology now where you can just do it from home?
Yeah,
are you able to do it from home yet?
Honestly, I think if we were like funded by Area 51, we probably could do it. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way the technology isn't out there. But the problem is, I don't think people would come back from break and they'd probably be passed out like this, you know, and I don't know if the airplanes would love that. So, yeah, the NAS though is improving. The National Airspace System is improving. It's funny as I get older, and I just turned 29 a few days ago.
Oh, so old.
And I know, so old. I definitely feel like my level of pride for this career is something that I really hold on to. Like, I genuinely do care. Like, when an airplane gets bad service, I get kind of hot about that. I'm like, a guy should not be on a 20 heading right now, and why is he doing 250 knots? Look, he's 330 over the ground. He's flying an extra 40 miles. I'm like, slow him to 210 and give him a good turn. I'm like super passionate about that shit. You know what I mean?
God.
So
if you could only hear what we're saying when that's happening.
Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute. If we're flying away from the airport, why are we still doing 250?
Yeah.
I'm one of those kind of guys. I'm
right.
passionate.
Well,
someone gives a bad vector. I'm like, did you think that was going to work? No, it's not going to work. It was never going to work.
The old, you're going to go a little bit through final on this one.
Yeah.
But just turn back, I'm like,
yeah. But it's funny that people
No
still tell me, they're like, Vento, when you're vectoring planes, have some patience. My problem, I think, with my youth and my my assertiveness, I just want to turn planes. I feel like I have to be talking. And some of the coolest things that you can do is just literally sit there. Hey, Hawker 7 Alpha Lima heading 310, maintain 4,000. Challenger 7 Alpha Mike, traffic 2 o'clock, 5 westbound, Challenger at 3. And you're like, everything's kind of just done.
Yeah, that's what happens when they're using RNAV departures and RNAV arrivals to RMP approaches. It's just quiet. Everyone's just like,
it's quiet.
Right,
yeah,
contact tower.
Pretty much. Yeah,
tower.
Teterboro, they've got the this RNAV Yankee 19 approach, and they've got these transitions now. And I think the NASA's starting to develop it in areas where it's going to work, where you don't have to vector airplanes to final. They're just key points where you can just say, hey, clear strat, maintain 4,000. Hey, cross strat at 4,000, clear RNAV Yankee 19, maintain 210 knots or greater. And you're like, cool, this is easy. And the pilots like it because you guys are just following the profile, managing speed control. And it's like, hey, 180 knots or better to 5 DME, contact Teterboro 19.5.
It seems funny, though. I was going into San Diego the other day from the north, and I'm like, hey, can I just get the RMP whatever, which is, radius to turn approach.
Sure.
That takes you right in. And they're like, I had it all set up for that and everything. They're like, no, we're going to have to give you vector CILS. And I think that's because, I don't think, but it only works when everybody's doing that. Because if you're trying to vector somebody in between, it doesn't seem like it really works. It seems like it's kind of an all or nothing thing. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
No?
So the problem with sometimes an RNAV approach during a busy push, again, I don't know what you got going on. And this is going to sound terrible, but I'm going to say this and be honest. Some controllers are just weak. Just being honest, right? So hear me out. Hear me out.
Can tell.
So for some reason, the mind just is so conditioned to doing this, right? This is the box. We're doing the ILS or localizer 27 at San Diego today. And then here comes this pilot. Hey, can we do the RNAV 27 or RNAV RMP? It's like, wait, nope. Vectors localizer. It's it's easy to stay in the box. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see.
And just do what's normal, and you're still providing a service. The plane doesn't really get any less of a service, but I don't know what I do. Too much. Whereas me, I'm like, it genuinely is not going to work because I've got a 6-plane sequence, and by the time you count the flying miles and you go from this point wrapping around, I'd have to bend this airplane and give them a 240 heading, come back around southeastbound. And it's now I'm giving you what you want, but I'm also giving someone else a disservice.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, if I can't give this guy the approach, hey, it's going to be the localizer 27, for example, vector to final approach course, because my sequence is set up where I don't have enough time and room and space to do all that. Now, if you come ask me at 11:30 at night, dude, ClearDirect whatever fixed, descend and maintain whatever, probably clear the approach. But at 2 in the afternoon, probably not going to happen.
I think that we see that all the time, especially as some of us that are flying more advanced business jets, myself not included. But with some of these new avionics systems and RMPAR and some of the stuff, it's awesome. But it's just not really likely that you're going to get that stuff. And that's what I think is a head scratch. Scottsdale.
It's a good point. It's a good point, Dylan. Yeah.
It's so dependent. Like going into Las Vegas, it's either, vectors and it's crazy and all this, or it's the airport's 2 o'clock and 30 miles. So we don't have inside. You're like,
it's lowest common denominator.
Contact the tower at whatever the final thing.
Yeah, and that's usually the time where you could ask for the RNAV, RP, Zulu, or Yankee because it's there's nothing going on. But then on the controller side, this a guy or girl's probably like, You want to do what? I'm giving you a visual today, and you don't want that?
I know.
You want to go fly an extended approach? It's like, what's wrong with you?
It's funny, but like in Denver, they'll get on this thing where they're using all these RMP approaches.
Yeah,
and it's pretty cool how it like just flows by itself when they get that all set up. It's like, it's pretty cool. And that's the thing. The other thing too that's just awesome is en route CPDLC. Like, when is that going to be everywhere? Because I don't want to talk to the center anymore.
I wish I could. I wish I could tell you. What's unfortunate, I do feel like the center environment has a lot of technology compared to the terminal low-level environment. If you were to come into the Tracon and any Tracon and check it out, you'd be like, wait, you guys still use flight strips? Just things of that sort in nature. I've had a chance to visit New York Center and see the technology, and it's really cool. I got to go visit like their Oceanic Center, and it's like a guy who's just like sitting like this. And he's just like got a mouse, and he's just sending a message and just sending a message. And there's like, I mean, I don't know how much stress is involved in that, but it looks very relaxing. Meanwhile, it's like we're in the Tracon, 30 miles west, and it's like heading 120 It's like, oh my gosh, like you can't catch your breath, So
you're using a radar scope from 1978.
Thankfully not. The technology has definitely improved, but it's like the environments are two different worlds, and the technology. I'm hoping the government will definitely give us better, I guess, funding or whatever you want to call it. The NAS works. It works great. And we push a lot of planes. We're sorry if anybody from London Heathrow is listening, but, we don't take planes, bring them to London Heathrow in 4 different holding patterns and descend them on down and clear ILS. It doesn't work that way. Like, we're pushing 40 airplanes an hour on a single runway. Atlanta was 132 an hour, and you're landing 3. So it's just different, it's different, but that's how we want it here. Like, that's the culture that we have facilitated, because every airline has a representative, right? Like United, for example, has their people, Delta, it's like they all have like a representative, and they work closely with air traffic. And, could you imagine being this representative who, you have a boss to answer to back at headquarters in College Park or, Houston Intercontinental. And it's like, yeah, the rate at, I'm going to make up an airport. The rate at Denver just went down to 40 an hour. 40 an hour? Well, why are we running only 40 airplanes an hour? You know what I'm saying? So it's like the conditions of the airport and the environment are always changing. But for some odd reason, I do feel as if, like controllers, sometimes we just get pooped on. Well,
it's funny is that a lot of times we'll get on a release, they'll add some fuel, and they're like, because the arrival rate is so-and-so and the maximum is this or whatever. Like, they know, but they're just like, yeah, just go anyway. Here's some extra gas in case you need to hold her.
Yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like bitching or anything. Like I said, we do what we have to do. We work the planes. That's what we get paid for. But any extra job, I mean, it's like if a corporate job. If you're sitting at your desk and your boss comes over, he goes, hey man, take this right here and knock that out for me. You're like, oh, man, I got to do more work.
TPS reports.
TPS. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you just take it.
So I'm curious, Derek, because I don't know if you know much about this, but you said there's representatives from each airline that work with facilities.
They're at the Air Traffic Control System Command Center. They're at their System Command Center, and I guess they work with like traffic management and based off like conditions and airport arrival rates and weather and stuff like that. They all kind of work closely. And again, I don't know how on their side that really works when it comes to like their flight schedules and stuff, but I'm sure they'll know ahead of time, like if there are going to be like delays incurred and things like that,
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a big system. I mean, because you think about it, we have all these rigid departure times, right, of the flight schedule.
Yeah.
But the amount that each airport can handle is fluid, right? Depending on
that's the thing.
Local
it's
conditions and everything else. So it's to get all that to mesh together is got to be a real
miracle. Yeah, I mean, imagine you guys were supposed to arrive at the gate at 1800 Zulu, but we had to give you guys extended vectors because we're getting our butts kicked, and you don't get there till 18:20. It's like, well, there's a 20-minute delay for the next flight. You know what I mean? So, it's tough. It's a bigger system than I think I even realized, because I'm like just a small pawn in this whole thing.
I have a question. I need you to set the record straight on this.
All right.
Does anybody in the Tracon care or even look if somebody's going over 200 knots below Class B? This is just a yes or no question. I need you to first answer with a yes or no, and then you can explain yourself. Just set the record straight.
If the speed you're showing on the ground is what you say is 200, I believe you.
It's funny, but it's funny. I asked that question, but I think it's so location dependent, because if you blast off out of San Jose,
San Jose,
to the north, or off of 30, and it's a right turn, and if you accelerate to 250, and they get pissed because you're under San Francisco's airspace. So everybody kind of knows there to watch this and stuff. And then it's funny, some other places, there's an arrival into Orange County, and there's a fix on it called LAXXB.
Okay.
And that's kind of like a hint to, like, that's where you go under LAX's Class B airspace.
Okay.
So I always put 200 and it manually put that on there. So the airplane plans the descent to slow to 200 there, or 210 or whatever, something close at least. And then, but then other places, like when we get vectored into Phoenix, I don't know if anybody pays attention to that, like, because they're vectoring us all around to go to Scottsdale, and you slip under the Class B way out, and it's like, is anybody slow down or what?
Yeah, no.
Derek doesn't want to say anything. Derek's out on this.
And then somebody got pissed at me because I slowed, and he's like, "Oh, well, now you slowed down, so I'm gonna have to vector you to here." I'm like, "Dude, what do you want? Yes or no?"
Damn. Can I speak freely about this? Am I going to catch backlash? Oh, man. Let me say this. I think every facility is different. I think every controller is different. I think every scenario is different. Combine all of that together, and I think you're never going to have an answer that you're going to want.
It's hilarious because there's so much standardization in, like, the verbiage and stuff that the controllers use. But you go to one airport, and if you exit the runway and just start taxiing, you're a dead man. You go to O'Hare and you do that, and you don't do that, you're also a dead man. So you kind of have to figure it out. It's pretty. It's kind of. I mean, it keeps everything interesting, but it's just funny the inconsistencies between each facility. And it's like, dude, what do you want us to do?
Yeah, it is. It's almost as if the NAS requires you to be very fluid and, like, know what's going on. Like, I think of it this way. I talked about the Atlanta slam dunk last episode, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, sure, going into Denver, you could be like on a 90-mile final straight in, and you're just descending via these step-down fixes, and maybe you just stay at 250, and then when they tell you to slow to 210, 180 or greater, whatever, you just drop the gear, drop the flaps, you're done. Well, pilots who, like, come off of IOE, I have a lot of friends who've told me, like, the captain will say, listen, I know it's your first time coming in here, maybe your second or third, but I'm telling you right now, they're running visuals, you need to be ready. And it's like, now in your memory bank, when I come to Atlanta, I've got that programmed in.
Yeah, and that's why everybody does know, you kind of figure it out.
You just know. So now when you go into, like, Denver, it's this standard. So, like, as a pilot, like, maybe that's the fun part. I don't know.
I was just going to say, that's the fun part.
That's like the fun part is, like, it's like, I mean, let's be honest, like, we're kind of showing off a little bit, like, on the pilot side. Like, I know this airport because I know this. It should be like that. And the cool thing, and the reason I believe pilots are type A and should be type A is, like, that level of awareness keeps everybody, like, sort of accountable, because you don't want to be known as a shitty pilot. You don't want to be known as a shitty pilot. It's like being a controller. You don't know the fix for the RNAV Yankee 19 is Strad there. It's almost like you know what I mean? That holds people accountable. So it's like, you don't know when you're coming into Atlanta, you should be ready. Like, how'd you not know that? So my whole point is that I think the good thing about these sort of differences in facilities, and that you have an awareness of that, is it sort of, like, keeps people on their toes. Like, oh yeah, coming into San Diego, that is what we have to do.
It's funny because, like, going into Denver is a great example. If you're trying, like, a lot of airports are landing, 3 different runways, and you can kind of predict based on what direction you're coming in, what runway is most likely.
Right.
And you're probably 90% of the time we're right. And then you go to Denver, and it's like
so many changes, right?
Yeah, it's changes. And then you'll look and you're like, you're on this arrival, and then you'll get the ATIS, and they're landing to the north. And this arrival clearly is for all the south runways, right? If
Sure.
you're landing south flow. And you're like, so you call the center and you're like, hey, are you sure we're going to be on this arrival? He's like, yeah, that's what I'm showing, man. So I'm like, all right. So and, you know, we have to brief and do all these checklists and all this crap. And then if you change it, then we have to like rebrief and do all this. It's so funny. So everybody gets so worked up about like Denver,
of course,
change
you know,
everything here, and then you'll rebrief it, and then they'll change it again and change the runway.
Of course,
and their approach.
yeah.
It's like,
well, that's why we were big in Atlanta. We would always have to reissue the localizer frequency because the approach course to the final for all runways are all 275, but you know the localizer for 26 right would be like 108.95, and then 227 left would be like 110.89 or whatever it is. So, if we give you a runway change, we'd say, no, change to runway 26 right, localizer frequency 108.95.
That's
just
funny.
to give you the heads up, like, because that's the last thing we want you to do is join the final. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm joining 26. Like, where are you going?
Yeah, it's bad.
It gets bad. It gets bad.
All I know is, Derek, is when I come into LaGuardia, I always slow to 200 about 30 miles out just for safety. What do you think about that?
That's probably not a great idea. Yeah. Yeah. I was watching the scope the other day and I saw, of course, they come in at 10,000 over Beauty on the Milton 3 arrival, MIP 3. And I don't work that sector, but we see a lot of their traffic. You know, we're either above them or below them. And yeah, Southwest is just ripping at like 370 over the ground. You look behind, Americans doing like 290. I'm like, they're so weak. So weak, you know?
It's the same as working ground, too. I was like behind this United dude. Yeah, in Vegas. I'm like, what is this guy doing? Like, seriously, we're not like, yeah. I don't even know why we're always in a hurry, but it's just we have published ground speed limits on the ground for taxiing. Like, you look at the screen to read the ground, like speed limits.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Southwest needs it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. That's why, like, I flew Delta actually a few weeks ago, and I put it like a little Instagram story up, and I said, wow, looks like a Southwest taxi today. A couple of my friends that aren't in aviation are like, what do you mean Southwest taxi? I'm like, I'm telling you right now, the next time you fly Southwest and you come off the gate and you have a long taxi, you're just going to look out the window and see how fast you're going. A couple weeks later, like, oh my God, we were like doing like 30 mile an hour. I'm like, I'm telling you, it's fast, you know?
But taxi with purpose.
Seriously,
right.
seriously. Funny story.
Okay.
Though. Actually, I'll tell you this real quick before we go into the next segment. I'm training on Columbia ground. First facility, 2014. This guy named James Pepper, awesome guy, retired. He's a really great guy. He was like a whiz of air traffic. There's this twin engine Embraer Brasilia 120 taxiing out. And there's this lovely Delta jet taxiing down to the end. Mind you, like, this airport's not big. It's only 2 runways. And I key up and I tell the Embraer, I'm like, can you pick up your taxi speed? And my trainer keys up and he goes, sir, sorry, training in progress. You're taxiing just fine. Please don't do anything different. Just, you know, maneuver your aircraft as you need to. The Delta jet behind can wait. And yeah, I knew from there on out, like, I would never say anything stupid on the frequency ever again. Until the following week, I asked the pilot after looking at his flight strip, hey, quick question for you. The on-course to that first fix, where is that? He tells me the heading, and I go, did you say heading 360 or 370? And he goes, there is no 370. And I said, yeah, you're right. Only Chuck Norris can fly heading 370.
That's good.
That was it, man. I was like, wow, like, I was learning very fast, you know, just don't sound stupid.
All right, things are getting a little too intense with Derek, so let's take a quick break here and recognize one of our sponsors. It's our friend Tim Pope, a fellow Diamond Dog as well. Tim is with Cetera Investors, and he specializes in advising professional pilots.
It's a financial dog.
In financial matters. Our financial Diamond Dog. That's right. Tim has been on the show a couple times recently, and I think you'll appreciate his insight for pilots. He kind of breaks financial terms down into aviation language. You know, the thing that I like about Tim the most is that he has this whole picture of life. Like, we've talked about money issues before with him, and he'll be like, hey, money isn't everything. Like, you got to enjoy your life, and like, let's set things up so that you can have that full experience and you know, you're not just crunching numbers on a spreadsheet. So if you're a professional pilot and you're looking for some help, you can set up a free meeting. We'll have all of his contact info in the show notes. Thanks for your support, Tim. All right, Derek, I got one for you here. We got an email from a listener, Jason, and he says, hey guys, just finished up a 3-day trip on New Year's Day. My FO and I had a conversation about on major holidays, how some of us sign off with a controller. Happy New Year, Happy Thanksgiving, etc. Our discussion revolves around whether or not the controllers get sick of that because they, like us, are working the holiday and they just have to hear it for hours straight. It became more of a game of how many holiday sign-offs were heard over the day. I thought it might be an interesting topic to discuss. Personally, I am not against it, but it does become very redundant when flying on a holiday. Yeah.
Okay, my initial response, just to lighten this up.
Hold on, Derek.
Okay.
Let me play. Max and I like to do public service announcements for our listeners. So let me play the public service announcement music. Go ahead.
Let me start off by saying this. Clearly, this individual doesn't have much seniority because they're flying on the holiday. Second, we don't mind. We actually kind of have a game on our side where we try to figure out if during the holidays we're a little bit nicer. And most of us genuinely don't mind because we're getting holiday pay. So double time's an amazing thing. And if you want to say Happy New Year, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, we don't mind. I think at the end of the day, you have to understand, as you're transiting all these facilities, we don't have to hear most of that. So we're in our own facility. You know, most pilots, only 1 out of a dozen actually say it. So it's genuinely not overwhelming. But I find that it creates a funny discussion behind the scenes because the guy that's usually in a terrible mood suddenly has so much joy and passion for the job. And he's like, Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday. And the individual who's usually happy just goes, holidays. This guy just wished me Merry Christmas. Oh, can't believe this guy. It's not a group of us. It's not a group. It's like 1 or 2 individuals.
It was like if you check on and like say it's Thanksgiving, right? And you're like, hey, Southwest 2346, flight level 350.
Yeah,
I was trying to play. It would be funny to have just like a turkey gobbling soundbite just to put at the end of your sign off, or like on Christmas, just have like a good recording of a Santa. Ho ho ho! Southwest 2365, flight level 320. Just
No, seriously, genuinely, I will say, you know, you have to understand, like, as a pilot, you're going through like all these different facilities, like transiting all these different facilities, and you know, like I'm at work for 8 hours, and not all pilots like really care for the extra jargon. You know what I mean? Some do. Some controllers just they could care less, you know. But I hear a lot of guys and gals all the time like, "Hey, Happy New Year to you too." You know, like not every single pilot is saying it every single transmission, every single time. You know, not every United jet, not every Southwest jet's saying it.
I think that the key is if you're going to do it, it has to sound natural.
Sure, yeah.
Too. If you're making a point of trying to say it on every check on and it's forced, then that's when I think it's like,
well,
oh boy.
It seems like around like certain holidays, you know, there's a sense of like camaraderie. I feel like, you know, it's
we're
like,
all working.
We're all working together. We're here. We're in the mud, working through the trenches, especially like Thanksgiving Eve. That's usually the biggest travel day. That's usually the worst.
Oh, yeah.
So like Happy Thanksgiving, you know, like, hey, we're there. No worries. But, you know, we appreciate that. I think what means more is when
double pay.
Well, that too. That's amazing. It's amazing. Is like, you can't be the guy that says Happy New Year and then be a shitty pilot. You know? like you come in with like all this Happy New Year energy or whatever, and it's like you're missing every transmission. And then at the end of it, when we're ready to ship you to the tower, it's like, yeah, Happy New Year to you too. You know what I mean? Like we're hoping like that pilot is just usually like a really great one, because to me it shows like a sense of confidence. Like, hey guys, Happy New Year, Southwest 101. Hey, Southwest 101, 180, announcer better to 5 DME, Newark Towers 18-3. All right, 101, over to the tower 18-3. Happy New Year, guys. Like, that's the pilot that we want. Not like, you say Happy New Year, and then they come back, and you're like, over to tower bye. And you're like, okay, well, excuse me. You know, I'm sorry. I wish you the best, you know. Enjoy your 2022.
Hey, have you given thought to, like, how much New York attitude you're going to possess when you get turned loose on the TRACON? Because there's definitely a range on that at the Tracon.
Yeah.
I just think that there's an expectation in every facility. Everyone knows, like, everyone just knows. I think I'm just a talker in general, which I'm sure you guys are very well aware of. So I don't think I'm going to really change anything. It's kind of funny. I worked with this girl in Atlanta, and she would always say, Derek, you're like a pilot's controller. And she said, if you could like take these guys out on dates, you probably would do it.
We'll just give you a list of the crew hotels. You can just hang out at the bar and be like, yeah, I was working 23/7 when you came.
Yeah, it's just, I know what she's saying. She's saying, like, I'm just friendly and the pilots can never do wrong. And I'm like, that's not true. Pilots deviate, do things all the time. I said, but, I do feel like a lot of times we do lack an awareness of what these people are doing. For example, I'm not a fan of hearing a controller give a pilot a instruction and then they forget to say something else. So they go right back and the pilot says, say again. Are you guys brain dead? Like, not the pilots, but like my coworker, like maybe, do you not understand? Like when you tell an aircraft to descend and maintain 5,000 and you guys are in the cockpit and say 5,000 check, like as you're talking to one another and that controller keys back up for that second transmission, you may have not heard that. And they're like, oh, the pilot didn't hear what I said. I say again, I don't have time for this. And you're like, bro, if you just would have combined your transmission up, there would be no issue. So if you need to say turn right heading 120 descend and maintain 5,000, like maybe that would have been a good time to do it. But don't, haggle these pilots because they didn't hear what you said. Like, honestly, I wish air traffic could be better. I feel for you guys sometimes because, sometimes you have a lot of responsibility up there.
No,
you're
right.
doing a lot
it's
of
hard.
things. It's hard, yeah. It's hard. I
Thank
agree.
you for recognizing. Where's the music? Come on.
Oh, you want it back?
Thank you for recognizing our feelings sometimes, Derek, because it is hard up there. It's
listen.
And the weather's bad sometimes, and
the coffee's not very good often.
Well, I always get a kick out of it. We always say, like, when we hear an angry pilot, it almost sounds like they're on the last leg home. They're just ready to be done for the night and call it quits. But, we're super go with the flow. It just depends what day you catch us. Maybe the staffing's good. Maybe
New York controllers are super go with the flow.
We're go with the flow.
Okay.
We're go with the flow.
Okay.
That's all it is, man. That's all it is.
So you're going to be working the sector, you said Newark, so you will be dealing with Teterboro and Newark, right?
Teterboro, Newark, Morristown, Caldwell, some of the satellites, Greenwood Lake, Sussex. They do a lot of parachute stuff up that way. Princeton, Somerset, Lincoln Park. Yeah, all that stuff.
Wall Street Heliport? Is that
none of that stuff. It's just slightly east. It's more LaGuardia stuff over there, yeah. But the airspace is very complex. It's like really giving me an eye opener in air traffic. I thought I was like really good when I left Columbia for Atlanta. And I remember I sat down and I was like, oh my God, like, these controllers are good. And then I got here and I was like, yeah, these controllers are like good as well. Like they're solid,
So in that environment, do like you is a good example. You come in, you're 29 years old. Is this something that you could run out to retirement, or do you hit 50 and you're like, all right, it's time to go to Casper, Wyoming and just chill?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I do have some goals and dreams of like retiring in Charleston. I would like to do that.
Charlie West or Charlie South?
Oh yeah, South Carolina. Yeah, would never go to West Virginia, I don't think. But no offense to anyone out there, I'm sorry. But yeah, Charleston, I believe, is going to be like what they call like a little mini super TRACON. I believe they're combining Myrtle Beach to it as well as Florence. Don't hold me true to that. I think that is the case. So they might be a level 9, but great area to live down there. Spent a lot of summers down there. Super cool to be on the water and go fishing. I'm a huge, I'm into fishing. So that'd be an ideal spot. But, it's tough. The workload here, it's heavy every day from what I can see, from monitoring it. It's a lot. And to sit behind a radar scope for the next 20 years, just getting your ass handed to you, it's a lot. You know what I mean? So who knows? The quality of life is very important to me. Yeah, I don't have a family and kids, anything like that. Would I want to do that? Of course. But it's just tough, like 6-day work weeks. Like we work our asses off here.
6 day?
Yeah, 6-day work weeks.
That's normal?
Yeah. So it's a lot. It's a lot on the body, a lot on the mind, and hopefully, it improves. But we'll see what happens. Yeah. 50 would be a nice age to go.
We need to transfer some of these center guys to TRACON.
Oh man, they're
right?
understaffed too. I mean, it's like pilot shortage, air traffic shortage, flight attendant shortage. It's just we just work. We just we just make it work.
Is the government changing any of the requirements as far as like age requirements or anything to be a controller? Has anything moved?
So. I don't believe so. Yeah.
What about automation? Like, do you think there's going to be place for AI and stuff? Like, say once the centers go full CPDLC, right? And then do you think you ever see anything like to help alleviate the amount of bodies we need to go to some sort of automation where one person can handle more airspace or whatever, and it can automatically issue in-trail spacing requirements and stuff?
So I think about a gentleman named Adam who works at Heathrow Tower, and they have like some really cool technology where I believe they have some technology like they don't run the airplanes exactly like we do on the approach side of things. But if you had a system that could account for like wind, speed, and like airport arrival rate, I almost wonder if you could just use a human being and like follow like an approach path. Like imagine if we took what I think is a good vector out of it and just followed like some sort of system that told us what to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, do I go in this gap or like, no, like that's actually the gap over here, rather than having to use the human interaction of like, well, I'm going to slow this guy to 210 and put him here, when the system, if there was a system that realized like, no, keep this guy 250 and put this Air Canada in this hole here, then make an eastbound turn. Like, could we improve efficiency of vectors and speed control to also account for like runway occupancy time? So essentially is never having to really like guess anymore, but rather just taking really the guessing out of it and creating more of a system for automation.
I wonder, you wonder if it seems like an interesting place to do that would be like Memphis.
Oh, FedEx
or
runs,
Louisville, like in the middle of the night, and you wonder how much. I'm sure they're always looking to optimize all of that kind of stuff.
Well, it's funny. Memphis was the first place where they did the new recat separation, which they just did another recat update, so we can run more airplanes at smaller intervals. So, for example, like we used to use the basic system years ago, like when I first got in. For example, like a large behind a heavy was like 5 miles, right? So that's really never changed, 7 to get 5. But we have like all these just generic categories, like, well, what was a heavy? Well, then this whole super thing came about. Like, well, what's the super? And the super needed its own category. So then now, like, for example, the 757-200, don't quote me exactly. I think it's called like an upper large. It's not the same, just a large now. It's like there's upper small, and now there's categories A through I. So we had to go through this new briefing essentially to get refamiliar with like the new separation standards. So for example, my mind had to transition. Check this out. When you're looking at the radar scope, the data block on the scope, for example, would have the aircraft call sign. So it would say, for example, like Delta 742. It would say B763 and it would have an H next to it for heavy, right? It's a heavy Boeing 767. And then it would have speed and altitude and it would like co-share, right? We did the briefing and then I walked into work and we were doing like the lab stuff. And I was like, November 7 Alpha Charlie, it was heavy. I'm like, it's a LearJet. And I realized the recat updated with the star system and the H is not heavy. It's now part of the new recat. So what happens is if you're working an A380 Super, it has the category, wake recat category next to it.
So you don't have to
So
memorize.
you don't have to memorize. So like now if you're vectoring and the A320 now, which used to be a D, it's now an F. So category F and you have an I behind it, in your mind, like you have to know the separation standard, but now you know I behind an F, you need 4 miles directly behind. But again, you need 6 to get 4 for compression at the threshold. So it's just your mind has to like kind of like resync, but we've done like so many changes to recat that my mind is like, we might as well just have A through Z at this point. You know what I mean? It's just a lot. It's a lot,
Well, one of the things on I think it was the Gulfstream avionics, you could put in there a time. You could input a Zulu time to cross a fix, and the airplane would use auto throttles and slow or speed up to cross at that time. And it kind of gave me an idea. that I could see happening is like instead of vectoring you off or slowing you or speeding you up or whatever, like they do en route, I could see a time so when CPDLC, if they give you a reroute or something, there's an option on the FMS to hit load and it'll automatically load that clearance into the
really?
deal. Yeah. So couldn't you see? I could see at time instead of like the computer will look at all these airplanes and say, okay, here's the spacing or here's what we need to happen for the arrival, and this airplane has to cross at 17:49 and 22 seconds. The next airplane has to cross at 17:51 and 13 seconds. And you just hit a button and it CPDLCs to all the airplanes, and you hit okay, load, and the airplane will just instead of a speed and heading and all this, it will just adjust the speed to cross that fix right on the money on those times, and then it would line them all up like Rockettes. It seems like. Does that seem like something that would work, or is that just my...
Well, lowest common denominator stuff, though. Like, everyone's got to be equipped to do that.
Well, airliners, so.
Yeah.
There's a thing called TBFM. So, like, there's, like, this time-based metering, and the center environment actually has a plus or a minus next to your data block. So, either it'll tell that you're 1 minute early or 1 minute late. The problem is that we don't give a shit in the terminal environment, because that does not help me when it comes to sequencing you. So if Southwest is here and American's here and you guys are dead ass tie, it's like, it doesn't matter. Southwest, I need you at 310 or better. This guy's got to be 250. It's the only way I'm going to break this tie. So it's like, I'm still sequencing. Unless we get him in a line, like,
well,
boom,
that's
boom,
what I'm
boom,
saying.
boom, boom.
So you line, so then American would cross, and then Southwest would cross, 2 minutes later, and then they'd already be kind of
But they're not all
up.
coming from the same spot, though.
There's these I am with you, Max, on how to do this. It's the problem is we don't do that.
Oh, I
So
see.
the problem is like there's this line where like there's a line of planes and the center is like, bro, I need you. Can you take these two guys at like 300 or better? Because I'm right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Someone, or how about this? Right. Call for release program. Guy's supposed to take off at a Piedmont Greensboro Triad at, let's say, this time. Tower just goes, it's only 2 minutes away.
Send it.
Clear for takeoff. See what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Now he gets airborne, and it's like, the center's like, this guy doesn't fit in the hole that was supposed to be there. Now, finagle, turn right, turn left, climb, speed, and it's like all that. Then it feeds down the line. And then you're sitting there, and you're like, the center's not trying to hand those two off to me, is he? And he's like, hey, man, you see those two flashing at you? I'm like, I sure do. What do you want me to do with that? You take him? No way I'm not taking that. Spin him. Spin him. That's more of the dramatic one, right? But no, seriously. Sometimes it's tough because the system would also have to account for, like I said, like the wind conditions. Because, for example, they're coming in with a headwind from the north and 250 shows 220 over the ground and 250 from the south shows 340. How do we have the system account for that kind of stuff too? Because as controllers, you can tell like, okay, we are running far out of the final box. Hey, you guys got to go in a hold. This sector has to go in a hold. We're down the smoker. So again, how do we have a system that accounts for all the other variables and runway occupancy time and things of that sort too? So it's a lot. It's like, it would be an advanced system. And there's some things I would love to say on here that I would have to say off this pod because it would give you more insight into like,
we just have to wait for Elon Musk to tackle this one too.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
pretty much.
He's going to be delayed, and he's like, "All right, I'm going to fix this."
Yeah.
You got any good stories or anything else you want to hit before we?
Yeah, I'm like big on like the CRM decision making stuff. My big thing would be, for those that are getting ready to fly in the winter months, really like make good choices and decisions. And I know that sounds like super cliche, like just stuff in the pod with like some feeler message, but I still think back, I don't know if I shared this with you guys, but I still think back to my time at one of my facilities, and thankfully I wasn't the primary controller. I was one of the controllers before it happened, so I got to speak to the pilot, unfortunately. But like seeing pilots lose their lives over just things that could truly be prevented. I made a post the other day, actually, on my Facebook. Here it is. Celebrating 7 years in the agency, man, it feels good. This journey has been quite incredible, and I'm so thankful for those that have given me those 11 p.m. end of shift pep talks. You know who you are. In life, anyone just wants to know, am I going to make it? In a job that requires you to be so humble, I think it's imperative we ask others, are you okay? How are you doing? Going through that gate day in and day out, we take home situations that so many will never understand. Looking forward to the new year and all the things that it brings. Can't wait to speak to some of you in 2022. The reason I say that is because, it's just tough. We see situations, not on the daily, but I joke around, like in my dating life, when I meet like a new girl and I'll say, this is what I do for work. They'll always ask, wow, it sounds really interesting. I'm like, yeah, it has its ups and downs, right? And exactly, I know. And
I bet you go on a lot of first dates, Derek.
Yeah, a lot of first dates. Yeah, I've actually got one tonight. I'm actually really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, do you like on a regular shift? Do you go home and you think about like that day's work? Does it weigh on you pretty often, or do you have to kind of just shuffle that off? Otherwise, you'd just be bogged down.
Yeah, you would be bogged down if you thought about like it's not like the volume, like, oh, I got my butt kicked, I'm going home with that. Like that, expect that to happen like almost every shift. You're going to have like a busy session. It's the session where the airplane starts acting erratic. And because you've seen this before, you start to get like that little pit in your stomach. And then you get all positioned and maybe an hour or so goes by and you're kind of like, well, it's time to go home. And on the car ride home, you're like, wow, like, thank God, like we got through that. You know what I mean? So, I could sit here and rant all day on this closing up remark, but I just, like I said, hope that people make good decisions coming into the winter months. Be very careful and don't be afraid to ask questions because we're always there to help.
Them flaps, they ain't 20s, they 10s, but we keep them clean, though.
All right, that is going to do it for episode 69. Thank you for the energy infusion, Derek Vento. Did you learn anything, Max?
Yeah, of course I did. I always do.
I love that you bait him with all these questions. That's my favorite part. I wish you guys could see the video of it because Derek's eyes just roll back the minute you say it. You just like he makes these motions and he's like,
"You are the FAA.
Hold me back."
Yes or no? Yes or no?
That's right. Come on, Derek. Well, if you got any questions for Derek, feel free to shoot us an email. We'll have him back on, and he's our subject matter expert for ATC Teterboro N90 operations up in New York. Thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. Appreciate all of the reviews, emails, flight advice. You can reach out to us, info@215podcast.com to get in touch. Happy to send out stickers for anyone that writes us a review. It really helps to grow the show for us. Thanks to our sponsors, Harvey Watt, Advanced Aircrew Academy, and Tim Pope. It's Terra Investors. Thank you for the support. Looking forward to the next episode here in a couple of weeks. And, let us know what you think of that album art. Until then, remember,
flexibility is the key to air power. See you guys. And gals.
See you guys.
Rock God.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.